I know that you created the first workshops and career counseling and so
Right.
forth. And so it's sort of timely because probably as it was in the mid and late 70s, there was some economic squeezing. We're back in a period like that. And
Right.
I'm just kind of curious to hear the history of how that got started and what challenges you met. And
Well, how much time do you have?
well, I have
It's very interesting because what happened is I was, it was the spring of 76, and my husband gave a 2-hour lecture, or maybe the year before. Anyway, at some point at around then, my husband gave a 2-hour lecture on abortion and fetal research. And it was before human biology, which said it was devoted to humans, etc., and public policy, had never done much public policy. And student TAs actually, kind of went to Don Kennedy and said, this is fascinating, and where's the public policy part? And Don, I think, got a grant. And the next year, in the spring, he had this unit that was the public policy part. And my husband was involved in the abortion and fetal research part. There was an environmental part. And a third part, I don't remember exactly. But it was really well done. It was done in the core in the morning, and then they had a public lecture in the evening. And the students, the TAs, came to the faculty who were involved, in the development of this, in the lecture and the panels and whatever they were having, to their house and cooked dinner for the guest speakers. So these 3 students came to my house, and I was graduating from University of Santa Clara, getting a degree in counseling psychology, emphasizing career planning. And I sat on my kitchen counter while they cooked, and we talked. And they talked about why they were in human biology and the creative nature of the program, and the fact that then you would go to a career planning center and you would be put in a box because they didn't know what to do with people who were thinking outside the box. And I went to graduate school because I had the same problem. I was, a woman, entering midlife at the time, mid-30s, and you want to do something different. You don't want to go be a secretary or be a this or that. You want to help people, empower people to do what they need to do, recognizing their own particular skills. So human biology and I were kind of a natural match. And these students went to Don Kennedy and said something to the effect of, this lady is talking about things that we don't hear in career planning at Stanford. So he called me and asked me if I could develop a program for these undergraduates. And I said, who knows? I don't know anything about it. I'd never planned on working in the university. And I said, sure, why not? But I've got to work with somebody to understand, who the students are and what I'm dealing with. So a couple of the student advisors and I had many, many conversations, which worked into a series of workshops that I designed. And we wrote and then Don said, "Oh, it's great. Now sell it to the students." So we wrote a letter to the students and decided if a dozen students came, this would be a big success. We tried. I was going to be paid as a consultant, by the hour, so maybe 10 hours a week if I was lucky. Well, 36 students signed up. So I ran 6 groups. I had never, when I was in graduate school, intended to do any kind of group work. But, it's what you do when you look into things. And I walked around, actually, before I finished the proposal, I went to talk to some people around the Silicon Valley to see, describing the human biology major and asking how employable these people were. And in fact, very, because these are companies and schools and individuals who are looking for innovators. And bio students were always innovators. And so I felt confident that if the students were able to identify who they were and really express themselves, that they could do anything. So I wrote the proposal. The students came, and it was really quite wonderful. So that happened. So then that was in the winter. I think I started in the winter. And the first time I ran a group, I called it for some reason for 1 o'clock. And 6 people had signed up. That was the group size. And 1 o'clock came and nobody came. And I thought, well, that was a good job I had for 5 minutes. And then at 1:15, the 6 people showed up because apparently classes started at 1:15. And I never asked anybody and nobody told me, and that was that. So anyway, I didn't know what I was doing, but I went into these groups and I loved it. I loved the students. I loved the creativity that came from working with bright people. I mean, you just go in. It's not like you have anything set up. It's that you take your cue from the client, so to speak, and it was fabulous. I loved it. I thrived. They seemed to thrive, and together we developed, a program. Then spring quarter came. Don Kennedy was appointed head of the FDA, and he left abruptly to go to Washington. So they didn't have a chairman. And Don had been the second reader on they had a small honors program, and the honors program had a major advisor for each student. And he had just taken the role of second reader for all of the honor students. And so he left, and somebody had to kind of supervise and help let the honors program go forward. So it seemed to me that this was a great opportunity in a program like this where you don't necessarily, where you, on the one hand, see a lot of faculty, and on the other hand, you can see none because you're not in their discipline really, that the second reader should be somebody who could really give them more advice. So how was I going to find out who these people were? So that's when I used my husband, who was still a lecturer in the Corps in hum bio, and very good at that kind of thing, at knowing who did what and kind of giving us, reason, to go forward and letting me ask them if they would help these students. So this worked well. I got to one student, though, and I said that, Don Kennedy was going to Washington and that he needed a second reader for his work, and that I would suggest that he go to Dr. Bernfield. Oh, he said, I can't go to Dr. Bernfield. He's too busy. He lectures in the Corps and he's in the medical school, and I just don't think that would be possible. I said, I know it's possible. Well, how do you know that? This kid said to me, I said, well, he lives here. So the kid kind of said, oh, okay. I said, so you could call him, and this is what's happening. So the next day I go to work, and I'm in my little office, and a student that I know well comes in laughing hysterically. And there was, as you entered human bio at that time in building 9, there was this bulletin board. And these kids were standing around and talking about various things. And one of them comes in all hysterical, telling somebody, did he have gossip? It was really, Dr. Bernfield, the guy who lectures in the Corps, he lives with the career counselor. So it kind of made my day and my reputation. And, it was very funny. But that's the kind of program hum bio was. Everybody was friendly and open, and it grew by ideas and people. So anyway, that year ended, and they asked me if I would take a half-time job as Director of Advising and Career Planning. So I was fortunate enough to work with the student advisors and with the honors program and developing these programs. So one of the programs we developed was something called Experience by Degrees, where we invited hum bio alums to come and talk about what they were doing and how it related to the world, and how exciting it was, I guess, to be a human bio major, which it was always. And that's how it started. But our students did such extraordinary things. I mean, from river rafting to building from scratch, building a home in New Mexico to doing public service stuff. If you wanted to find a student at Stanford to get involved in public service or in something that was really exciting and new and experimental, you went to bio.
In an academic environment, the fantasy career is always basically to become a doctor or a professor. Like, it's what the faculty do. And the hope is that as many as possible of the students would continue in that.
No, human bio was designed so that it wouldn't attract so many pre-meds. And the fact that it did was an accident or should have been expected. But I think the whole idea of human biology was that people were going to invent something new and be whomever. And it wasn't necessarily going to be a doctor or a lawyer. It was going to be whatever, at least that's my view, and I started the career discussions. But the point is, you look out at the world and you reach and you see what's there and how it fits you kind of know who you are, and then you write the job description.
If anything, you were deliberately attempting to break out of that.
Right.
box.
I mean, so I would ask the students to describe, things that they'd felt successful at or things that they did. And one woman was described, she was a coxswain. I never heard of a coxswain at that point in my life. And it was amazing because the skills involved in being the coxswain in a boat are very different than just the rowers. And you explain that and you get people involved in who they are and what they like about what they're doing, and that goes to the next step, which is what's out there.
Like a coxswain has to be short. They're always small because they weight in the boat. And the other women are all huge, or there's little accidental things that make you good for things.
Right.
So let me stop right there and introduce you to Catherine Preston, our associate director, and I'm going to ask her to tell you about one of her students that she told us before, and show how maybe a student would even take an internship in something they didn't want to do to figure out how that works. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So yes. Catherine, Audrey.
Hi.
I was telling Carlos earlier, because I was talking about the relationship between internships and jobs after college, and saying that I really felt like if anybody got a job, even indirectly as a result of the internship, it was a rare occurrence. That really the internship had more of a pedagogical goal. And I was giving an example of the closest I could think of to a student whose career pathway had been more directly shaped by the internship. And it was this. I had an advisee who graduated just this past spring, and she had done her internship through the Stanford and Washington program. She's very interested in environmental policy and environment and health and policies regarding that. And she had worked in a congressperson's office and had really realized that people on the Hill know nothing at all about how people in the for-profit world think about health policy and environmental policy, and it was frustrating to her. She felt that they were very unrealistic, and so although she would never have thought about taking a consulting job because she kind of felt like it was a little dirty or exploitative or something, these consulting firms, she decided to kind of hold her nose and take a consulting job after graduation because she wanted to gain that perspective and be able to take it back to the Hill. But otherwise, I'm sort of feeling like the way the internships are now, yeah, maybe students have something to put on their CV.
Well, and I think people are very, they don't do anything unless it has some payoff. And I spend a lot of time at Stanford talking to parents. You're a human biology major, what can you do with it? The answer is anything I want to do. And it really gives the student a sense of entitlement and empowerment to conquer the world. And I always said you reach as far as you can and then you compromise. But you don't start out saying, oh, I want to do this, but I'll take that. But I like to think of, one of the people I like to think of is a woman named Catherine Kelly, who was in my first group I ever ran, I think. Very shy young woman at the time. Her father was a surgeon, and he wanted her to go to medical school. She was very, very smart, and she really didn't want to go to medical school. And they invited, and she was in one of my groups thinking about what she wanted to do, and she was interested in the environment and other things like that that were not medically related, but very shy. And she invited me to a graduation party, and her father introduced himself and really was quite angry with me because he felt that I had done something. I must have said something that ruined her life because she obviously was not going to medical school. And so we had this conversation, et cetera. And then she went to New York, and she wanted to be in environmental health, public health. And so we practiced. She went to see, I think, the dean of the School of Public Health at Columbia and said, how could I make myself attractive to this program? And he said, get a job. She said, well, I'm not from New York. Can you give me some suggestions? And she ended up at 3 Mile Island when all of the hell broke loose and, got involved in the whole idea of water toxicology, which she knew nothing about. But by the time she wrote the paper and studied the issue and had worked there for Dames and Moore, I think is the name of the company, and she applied to Columbia, she was a great candidate, and she, in fact, got a PhD and now has a company of her own in California. And I'm still friendly with people that I met the first year that I was in human biology. I mean, there's a woman who freelances for NPR, Debbie Franklin, who is a science reporter. And when she came into the first group, one of the first groups that I ran, she said she was interested in being an English major, or she was interested in English, but she thought that all educated people should know about science. And here she is all these years later, and she's essentially a science writer, reporter. I mean, I went from Stanford to Harvard. The difference was night and day because Harvard kind of looks back and sees what the tradition is. Stanford looks forward. Stanford looks at the students and the faculty and says, we're great because look at the people that we have here. And if you believe that you have the potential to do whatever you dream of, if you're realistic, if you have the skills, if you work hard, you're going to do it. And Stanford students are uniquely selected, I think, because they're willing to give themselves a chance. Give yourself some slack and just try. The worst thing that could happen is you don't get that job, so you'll get the other, or you'll invent a new one.
Do you have any last thing you'd like to say about HumBio?
I hope it lives forever and keeps changing. I mean, the one thing that was wonderful about it is that it keeps moving.